Welcome to the Retirement Roadmap by SHP Financial, a podcast empowering today's retirees and pre-retirees to make well-informed financial decisions that will help you spend more time living and dreaming than worrying and wondering. Join me, Matthew Peck, along with my co-hosts, Derek Gregoire and Keith Ellis, as we share actionable financial strategies and insights, as well as interview top thought leaders in the world of finance, accounting, and estate planning. This is all aimed at preparing you for the retirement you've always dreamed of. Our high-quality holistic planning process has helped thousands of families retire and create what we like to call the ripple effect. The Retirement Roadmap is your guide to financial freedom. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.
All right, welcome everyone. And we are very excited to have Alina with us today. And she's really doing a great job as a CFP, a Certified Financial Planner, on our financial planning team at SHP Financial. And we have a really, really important topic, one that's relevant to so many, unfortunately, over the years that we deal with, but it's around financial planning for widows. So I know it's a very depressing topic, but something we have to make sure we address. And yeah, thanks for joining me, Alina. I appreciate it.
Hi, Derek. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be back. This topic is so important and it affects more people than we really realize.
Yeah, it's been just talking off air. We had a good friend in their 50s lose a spouse recently, and just dealing with all the things we're talking about. Alina had drafted a lot of these notes before this happened, unfortunately, but it's all so relevant as, because I'm in the middle of the situation right now. And unfortunately, running this company for over 22 years, or almost 22 years, I'm sorry, we've seen so many scenarios like this. And people that have a plan, it works out. And unfortunately, sometimes when they don't plan, it can be really hard. No matter what, it's going to be hard. It's a path that no one wants to go down. But we always say, if we can do our job and make things a little bit easier financially, one less thing to worry about so the spouse can grieve and do what they need to do, that's a big, important part of what we do here at SHP. So start with a big picture. Why is financial planning for widows so important?
It's a great question. Losing a spouse is one of life's most difficult experiences. And beyond this pain, there are a wave of financial decisions, complex financial decisions that need to be made, and sometimes quickly. And a lot of people don't realize that 80% of men will die married, while 80% of women will die single. 70% of wives will become widows, and over 70% of those who remarried, over 70% will become widows again.
Oh my gosh.
So that's eye-opening. And that's why it's so essential, especially for women, to be financially prepared.
Yeah. And I think when people, so let's say, obviously those are eye-opening stats. Like that's, when you think about it, that's crazy. And, that's always a joke, like, oh, the men, like we don't have the same life expectancy and so forth. But so let's say, and before we get into this, I want to also add too, over the years, we might touch on this more down the road, but over the years, a lot of folks couples have joined our firm over the years because one or the other might be the one that does all the financial planning, right? And with that scenario, if let's say one spouse does all the planning and the other spouse kind of is like, yeah, I just rely on him or her, right? Well, in that scenario, because if you don't have a plan, and let's say you're the person, let's say Alina, you're the person doing everything, and something happens and you pass away, your spouse at that point, they don't know what to do. So they could be vulnerable in our field. Not that there's a lot of bad apples, but there are some bad apples that just, hey, here's a quick plan. Next thing you know, they don't know what to do. And they're kind of like, oh, I guess I'll sign up with this person. It could be a bad decision. What I find is a lot of people that do it right, that are good planners, that want to get ahead of it, they want to do things, even if they feel like confident that they can do some planning on their own and some portfolio management on their own. A lot of times they'll work with us ahead of time to make sure that if anything happens, their spouse, they know there's a plan in place, they trust the firm they're working with, and so forth. You know what I mean?
That's a great example, Derek, because you're so right. After losing a spouse, a lot of widows, they experience this like foggy state where it's difficult to make decisions, and sometimes you have to make those decisions, right? And some people unfortunately take advantage of that, and they try to sell them products that they don't need, and it can dramatically affect their financial plan and their cash flow and other important aspects of the financial plan. So it's very important to work with someone you can trust and who will really take care of you.
So I know hopefully this isn't affecting a lot of folks that are listening or watching this podcast, but I know there's plenty out there. I know even if it doesn't, there's things you're thinking about, like what if God forbid something happens, what do I do? So what's the first thing someone should do financially after losing a spouse?
Well, the first step will be selling the estate, right? It's not fun, but it has to be done. And if a couple had a estate plan done before, that would be so much easier, and the process can go relatively smoothly. But if the documents were outdated or even missing, this process can become complex and emotionally taxing very quickly.
Oh yeah, I'm sure, because if your ducks aren't lined up, when you say estate planning, it's like wills, trusts, clear beneficiary designations, that all that has to be in place. What about estate taxes? Can that become a decent issue in terms of Massachusetts and federal?
Absolutely. So right now, we have people deal with two sort of taxes. Federal estate tax exemption and Massachusetts, the state taxes.
Yep.
And in our case, it's Massachusetts. So federal estate tax exemption is at all-time high. It's going to be $15 million next year.
That's per person, right?
That's per person. So $30 million for a married couple filing jointly. And it's portable. So it means that if one spouse hasn't fully utilized that exemption, it just passes to the surviving spouse.
So it's really $30 million before you have to worry about it.
Exactly. So I think most households in the United States don't have to worry about federal estate tax, which is good. On the other hand, estate tax is more of a concern right now.
Yes.
For example, in Massachusetts, the legislation passed in 2023 raised the exemption from $1 million to $2 million.
It's about time.
Right.
It was like that for 20-something years.
I know, but it's not even indexed for inflation.
Exactly.
So it's just going to stay $2 million for the next legislation, I guess. And it's also not portable. So if one spouse hasn't fully utilized it and it wasn't secured by, for example, like a trust document, trust planning, it's just going to be lost.
So that's a good point. So when she says it's not portable, it means let's say there's a couple, they're married and they didn't do proper planning. Well, they're each allowed $2 million of exemption before their estate's taxed. If you do a proper planning, then you can actually have $4 million worth of protection.
Preserved.
But if, let's say, you didn't do the proper planning and one spouse passed away, that's gone. So the well spouse that's still living only has $2 million instead of $4 million. So you lose it. If you don't do the planning, you lose it. So that's why it's important. You don't wait to do this when you're a widow. Unfortunately, you try to do it ahead of time. So that's critical around estate taxes. So that can add up to some serious dollars. And what if someone owns a property in another state?
So, for example, in Massachusetts, we have a lot of snowbirds, right?
Yes.
And let's say they are Florida. Let's use Florida, right? Florida residents for income tax purposes, because there is no income tax, so it's more beneficial for them. But they do have a house in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. So technically, they're still subject to Massachusetts state tax.
Yes.
Massachusetts, what it does, it takes into account the total gross estate, first to determine whether there is a taxable estate, and the threshold is $2 million, right? And then proportionally, it taxes only the property in Massachusetts. So still, there is, if the property is expensive, it can push over the limit, and there can be a potential tax liability.
Even if they own it in Florida?
Exactly. So no, if the house is in Massachusetts.
I'm sorry. I thought okay.
But if they are still Florida resident, they still can have a Massachusetts.
Gotcha. What if they're Massachusetts residents with a house in Florida?
So potentially their tax liability would be greater just because all their property that they own, except for the Florida residents, will be taxed.
Gotcha. Okay. Just double
yeah.
checking. Just making sure. So what about in terms of the estate settlement process? What are the important steps in that? Like when it settling the estate, it really means someone passes away. What do you do? Right. That's in essence what it means.
So you need to have a clear picture of all your assets together and start working from that list.
Yep.
Retirement accounts, you need to make decision whether to treat those as your own or treat as inherited IRA accounts. And there are some very important considerations in regard to required minimum distributions, when you can access the funds without a penalty. So if a spouse, the surviving spouse is younger than 59 and a half, they can actually access that account earlier, right? Before 59 and a half without a penalty if they treat that account as inherited IRA. But if they treat that account as their own, there will be a penalty.
Only if they take withdrawals.
Exactly.
So they follow the regular IRA rules.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yes.
Got it. And then you have obviously, so if you have, if you're inheriting money from a non-spouse, it has to be an inherited IRA.
Yes, exactly.
And so you have like all the retitling of accounts. You have to update beneficiaries on your accounts. You try to consolidate. So again, working with a recent couple where one of the spouse had passed away. It's brutal. Great people I've known for a little while, but this is like, they had like 3 or 4 bank accounts. They just, hey, let's get it to one, right? Let's take the spouse's name off it, get it to one account. Let's make sure there was a 401k. Let's get an IRA in the living spouse's name, and just getting everything transferred and done according to all these rules. So what about like cash flow? How does this change in terms of their cash flow and income when a spouse passes away?
Right. Usually the expenses stay around the same, right? Because you still need to pay the like property tax,
Heat and electric stay the same, right?
Exactly. It doesn't really change. Doesn't count for one's, spouse not being there anymore.
Yeah.
But the income can change. For example, if one spouse received pension and didn't have survivor benefit, that's going to be lost. Or if another source of income that wasn't properly structured or didn't count for the surviving spouse, that's going to be lost. So the shortfall has to be addressed.
Yep.
And also tax efficiently too.
So you also have Social Security, that if you're on Social Security, or even if you're not, you have the potential of getting 2 Social Security checks. Now you're only getting 1. Now you get the higher at the 2, but the other one just goes away. So the expenses might be similar, but you're losing this income.
Exactly. And also around that, I'm glad you brought up the Social Security, because there is planning around the Social Security benefits and when it should be claimed, the spousal, the survivor benefits, and also the spouse's benefits, right?
Yeah.
So for example, you can claim the survivor's benefit as early as 60.
So normally Social Security earliest age is 62,
Mm-hmm.
but if someone passes away, the spouse can claim it as early as 60.
Exactly.
But it's reduced a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be around like 75% of the full retirement benefits.
Which is not bad.
But if you do need to supplement your cash needs, right, to pay for your expenses, sometimes it's just necessary to turn on that income. For disabled spouses, you can do it as early as 50 years old.
Oh, okay.
So that's like another beneficial, consideration. But also, I think the strategy can be to decide about your cash needs, whether you need cash right now, and also taking a look at your own benefits. Because if your own benefits are higher than your survival benefits, perhaps you can turn on the survival benefits now to pay for some expenses, and then delay taking your benefits or claiming your benefits until later years, or even until 70.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I know. Everyone talks about when do you hire a financial advisor? You can see this go. There's so much more planning, by the way, you can do when both are well and alive and doing. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to wait till someone passes away. But what role does financial advisor and our team what's the biggest role we play at this point for the spouses? All the things we've talked about. Is it just kind
At
of
this point, like when
someone passes away? Like what are the main things you're seeing as like planning points?
So we help our clients, right? We try to make this financial part of that process easier for them. So we handle all the beneficiary changes. We handle, like, we open an estate account. So we do all that administrative stuff for them so they can actually concentrate on more, like grieving and like funeral arrangements and all that necessary things that have to be done. So we do that. We also review their cash flow, right? And see, like, okay, so what are your cash needs right now? Because sometimes they will have some one-off expenses like funeral costs, legal costs with the estate process.
Yep.
But some expenses will not go away. So, so we have to take a look at their plan and see, okay, so if they need some additional cash, what account should we use? And we have to be mindful of their tax liability, because they can claim a joint married filing jointly status only in the year when the spouse dies.
Yeah.
Next year, they switch to a single status, which can, bring
That's
some more tax liability, because the bracket, the deduction is smaller, the brackets are narrower, but the income can be kind of the same. So now they have to pay more taxes.
Well, that's a huge, let's say, so Alina made a great point that, like, when you talk about taxes and tax filing brackets, like, so for example, if you have, let's say your income's, 125,000, well, you might be around the 12% bracket, in that range, maybe a little bit higher, but around that range if you're married filing jointly. Let's say one of the spouse passes away. Well, the RMDs are still going to be the same because the IRA values are the same. You might lose some income, but at $125,000, now you might be in the 22% tax bracket.
Exactly.
So think about that. That's a 10% tax increase. Well, it's more than 10% from 12 to 22 is more than 10%, but there's an overall huge jump in tax brackets. So remember, your expenses are the same, but now you're keeping less of what you have coming in. So tax bracket management is another important subject. I mean, I hope no one's listening, like, getting a little nervous, but this is why you do planning, right? What else should widows consider from a planning standpoint? So let's say the foundation's done, they have, dust is settled. There's no other way to put it, but they're starting to, like, see a little bit of sunlight. They're always going to grieve indefinitely, but they're starting to, okay, we have our basic needs covered. We have cash flow. The advisory team at SHP or whoever you're working with has devised a plan to make sure you're going to be okay. What accounts to draw from the most tax efficiently. Once that's said and done, what's the next part of planning that they would consider?
Well, their plan will change as well, right? So they're embracing a new life. So they probably plan for a joint life together. So now they're living alone, and their goals might change, or they can remarry. And people do that, and sometimes it just helps with, grieving and just like the next chapter of your life. So when those change, we also need to update their plan. But also, I guess a very important part is to take care of their estate plan. So once the estate has been settled.
Yeah, settled.
Thank you. I need some coffee. The estate has been settled. We need to update their estate plan to account for, now they lost their spouse. So what's going to happen next? Who they want to inherit their wealth, and how to do it more tax efficiently, right? So that is a very important step.
I mean, I know, obviously, like I said, with Keith and Matt and I running the company for over 20 years. We know, like, it's funny, we know, like, there's a lot of value being provided, but when you put it, even like from one spouse passing away, that how much work goes into the plan from that point forward over the next several months. And we've seen it, like, here at us, when that happens, we know we're going to do whatever we can to be there for that spouse. That's our main priority. But the planning side, it's a lot of work to make, because there's tax. You're trying to hold certain tax exemptions. You're trying to make sure the spouse is okay. You're trying to make sure the short term's covered. You're trying to make sure their income's covered, but they might not have known how much income they need. They might not know their expenses. You have to start calculating that. They don't know what about like the healthcare changes, how to cancel one but keep the other. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But, I think we all know that good, solid financial planning, that's why when we build plans here, we say the SHP retirement roadmap, that looks at income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and estate planning. And Alina and her team do a great job. I mean, like I always joke around, we'll get 13 pages of notes for one client meeting. But it's great. That's why that's what makes us different, like with the true planning we're providing. So any other for, obviously, thoughts and prayers and everything you do for someone going through this, but any other recommendations that you have for like, someone that's just lost a spouse?
I do. I can recommend the National Widows Association, and our listeners who are interested, they can visit their website, the NWA Online, so THENWA Online, ONLINE.com. So they offer emotional, financial, spiritual support for widows.
Yeah, that's a great resource. And obviously, like I said, before we wrap up and close out, because I know it's a lot of information. I think everyone's head might be spinning. Are there any other advanced strategies to use where let's say someone has a spouse, and this is another situation I'm dealing with right now as well, like another client with a spouse has terminal cancer, and so what other strategies might be able to do for in that scenario where their spouse is terminally ill?
That's a great question. And there is some planning that can be done to help the surviving spouse. And what can be done, for example, if they have a taxable account with highly appreciated assets, those can be shifted to the ill spouse. So upon that spouse's death, the assets will get a step up in cost basis, and thus eliminating that huge tax burden for the surviving spouse.
Yeah.
So that's planning that can be very beneficial. Also, if clients or if someone has carry forward loss, if it's not utilized during their lifetime, it's just going to be lost. Mm-hmm. So also it's important, like if an ill spouse has a carry forward loss, let's utilize it. Let's sell some appreciated assets, to get that exactly to offset that, and maybe move those assets to the healthy spouse and keep the other appreciated assets in that ill spouse's account to get the step up in cost basis.
Really good ideas. I think like I've explained this in, thousands of times over the years, but if you look at, we always say the five areas of our retirement roadmap: income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and estate planning, right? But when you break down each one, it sounds like, oh, there's only 5 things. No. When we go to tax planning, there's step-up basis, there's carry forward losses, there's Roth conversions, there's HSAs, there's certain trust planning to mitigate taxes. We could probably sit here and go back and forth and add 10 more different. There's donor advised funds, there's QCDs, there's like so many strategies that can be used, but obviously what applies to that person. Then you go to like income, pension analysis, social security analysis. If someone passes away, you have different options as well. Expense analysis. So you can see, even though there's 5 worlds of financial planning, each world has like 10 different branches, if not more. So that's why I always say, like, even if you're a do-it-yourselfer, right, and you're listening, I urge you, if you're married especially, even if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you might be good at portfolio management, but imagine keeping up with all the things, Secure Act, One Big Beautiful Bill, Secure Act 2. There's things change all the time. So you have to be like I mentioned, Keith, Matt, and I have run the company 22 years. I don't know everything. That's why we have people like yourself who follow the changes in the tax law. We have CFAs and analysts who do the portfolio research, right? That's where it's a team's in place. So even if you're a do-it-yourselfer, hopefully you can be able to get all this knowledge to apply. But even if you can, I want you to think, can your spouse, can your wife or husband, if you pass away, do it at the same level? If not, you definitely want to find a firm, whether it's SHP or some other firm that can do this, because you want to make sure, and maybe this is the way I think, if something happens to me, I want to make sure my wife isn't thrown to the wolves or like in some really, really bad situation where she's vulnerable, right? And might make a decision that might not make sense. I want a firm that I know that would carry out all my wishes for my spouse. So if you're not sure, like I said, we have a lot of resources on our website, shpfinancial.com. You can always call 866-746-2401. But like I said, we're happy to help. We're happy to be a resource. If you want to take some time to come in, that's great too. But just a lot of resources online at shpfinancial.com. But as always, I know this was not the brightest topic, Alina, but thank you for bringing a smile either way and bringing some good information. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back with the next podcast very soon, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Roadmap podcast by SHP Financial. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you've liked what you heard, please share the show. Create your own little ripples so we can help even more people with their retirement goals. If you want access to all past interviews, including notes, resources, and exclusive content from SHP Financial, visit shpfinancial.com/podcast. Thanks again for joining us on the Retirement Roadmap podcast. And for all the attorneys out there, disclaimers and disclosures, I'm just going to put on my super serious voice and add our own. No statements made during the Retirement Roadmap podcast shall constitute tax, legal, or accounting advice. You should consult your own legal or tax professional on any such matters. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Our investment advisory services are offered through SHP Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance sales are offered through SHP Financial, LLC. Our advisors and insurance reps may offer clients advice and/or products from each entity. No client is under any obligation to purchase any insurance product.